Welcome to USA Global TV and Radio, where our mission is to provide education, entertainment, hope, and inspiration. USA Global TV and Radio connects you with experts and audiences all around the world every single day to help you succeed in business and to live a richer life. Visit us at usaglobaltv.com to learn about career and life-changing training and mentoring programs like the Listening Mentor. Subscribe to our newsletter to stay informed about our special programs and offers. Discover how you can become a guest on one of our shows or a host or producer of a USA Global TV and Radio show of your very own. That's USA Global TV and Radio, where the doctor is always in.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome home to USA Global TV and Radio. We are super excited to have the first episode of our new show, the Books, Blogs, and Poetry Show. So thank you so much for being here. I'm Dr. Jacalyn Kerbeck, and we are ready to invite our guest up to join us and hear about his journey. Before we do, let's welcome the star of our show, DIANN FLOYD BOEHM. If you haven't met DIANN, you certainly need to. She is the co-host of 4 shows, I'm losing track, and she is always making herself available to fill in for team members who are not here. That's because she has so much energy, vitality, and experience, and she's a true professional when it comes to hosting shows. She's also an international award-winning author of children's and young adults books. She is the global queen of networking, and she's a dear friend. Let's welcome DIANN FLOYD BOEHM to the program. DIANN, come on out. Hello.
Thank you, Dr. Jacalyn, for the very kind introduction. For a moment, I was wondering who you were talking about, but thank you.
Well, DIANN, it's all true. And I do want to let our audience in on a little secret, which is that this is an early time slot for you, right? You actually got up early, got yourself dressed and looking gorgeous. And thank you so much for doing this in this time slot.
You're quite welcome. And how could I not? I mean, books, blogs, and poetry. That is worth getting up for.
It sure is. And we do want to say thank you so much to Mickey Mickelson, because Mickey has sent us so many wonderful people on the corner bookstore that the show is constantly booked out for months. And it made perfect sense. You and I were having a conversation, I think this weekend, that we needed to have another space for people to come forward and be able to share their stories. And so we're expanding from books to blogs and poetry as well.
I know, it's so exciting. And yes, Mickey is wonderful. And he happens to be my publicist. So thank you, Mickey, for everything you do. And I think everyone listening and watching, you're just going to want to get up early and watch this show too, unless you're already up because you're on the other side of the world.
Absolutely. DIANN, tell us a little bit about your experience as an author. And you've put out so many incredible books and you keep going. So what is your motivation to keep writing and publishing?
Sure. My motivation is the world where we are today. There's so much, we're bombarded with so many things, and sometimes it causes fear. And I want, when people pick up, whether it's my children's books or young adult historical fiction, I just want to bring peace and love and kindness, and to remind you to keep love in your heart, and to help young children remember to keep balanced and love in their heart. So that's my huge motivation.
Thanks, DIANN. And that is certainly worthwhile for sure. So we have a wonderful guest who's not been to our platform before, but he's certainly no stranger to interviews. And he's joining us from the other side of the world, the middle side of the world, I should say, where we have a lot of friends in the United Kingdom. He's very close to Scotland, and he's going to share his journey as a writer. You know, we all have different experiences. You're an author, I'm an author, and I love how this community supports one another. There's no competition. There's enough room for all of us to celebrate each other's work. So his name is Keith Anthony Baird, and he is an author of dark fiction. Ooh, what does that mean? Let's welcome him and hear about his story. Welcome, Keith. Hello.
Hi there. It's lovely to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for being We're thrilled to have you. We'd love to have you just start off with explaining what is dark fiction.
Wow. Well, it's a big umbrella. Dark fiction for me, I never wanted to be sort of pigeonholed when I started off writing. I mean, I love things like dystopian work, and I love even post-apocalyptic or the horror genre or the thriller genre. So what I wanted to do with my writing was I wanted to kind of either explore those things individually, or I wanted to sort of what they call a genre mashup. So I could bring different elements into every story that I created. So I just thought, that's what I'm going to be. I'm going to be a dark fiction author, as opposed to just one who just concentrates on one genre. So the works that I've done to date, I mean, I did start off as self-published, but then I kind of realized that no man is an island. So I think it was probably about 2.5 years ago now, I decided to approach publishers. So I was lucky enough to land with one in Kansas called Brigid, who are really quite vested in what I do. So I'll go on to explain a bit more about that in time, but that's generally what dark fiction is. It covers, you know, the darker aspects of life. That doesn't mean that I'm some kind of some kind of guy who dwells on that kind of stuff. You know, I'm not you know, in my local store or whatever looking at I don't know, chocolate bars and thinking about dark thoughts. I'm not. I found as well most of the people who are dark fiction authors are just some of the most lovely people I've come across, to be honest. And there's quite a community of us out there around the world, and I know quite a lot here in the UK and in America and in different parts of the world. So yeah, it's quite a broad umbrella, but it covers a lot of things, but it's very interesting to explore. So there you go.
Thank you for sharing that. I have a follow-up question, then we'll go over to Diann. You alluded to the fact that just because you are writing dark fiction doesn't have any implication about, let's say, mental health, for example. But does it affect how you feel while you're writing it? So in other words, does it take certain energy to do so, and it leaves you feeling changed after you're done writing?
That's a very good question. I've never been asked that before. So, wow. No, to be honest, for me, all I can say for me personally is that the way I look at it is I'm kind of like almost like the way a method actor would approach their work. So I kind of try to put myself in the shoes of the characters, try to immerse myself into the world that I'm creating, and sort of think about how those characters would feel and think about how those characters would act in those circumstances. And that's really it. I mean, it doesn't, it's kind of like a sort of a detached experience, if you know what I'm saying. It doesn't affect me personally. And it's sort of like, it's almost like an escapism in a certain sense. So no, it doesn't, I don't feel once I've written something that I feel that it's changed me or anything like that. I normally just feel a little bit exhausted, to be honest, because I've used my brain so much for like so many hours, and I just need to go and sort of rest. Basically, that's about the only effect it has on me.
Thanks for sharing that.
What a great question that was. That was fantastic.
Maybe they'll keep me around here a little longer. Diann?
I love what you said, because if you truly want to write a quality book, I believe you have to immerse yourself into the character. So I love that you said that. And I know what you mean. I loved how you said detached, because if you don't detach, then you might become that character for a while, and that may not be a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I do recall the very first book that I wrote was a kind of it was a very religious book. Its theme was very, very heavily religious, and it was set in a kind of a broken future, and it's I mean, really if I started again, I wouldn't go down that route, because the first thing that I ever wrote, the first piece of fiction that I ever wrote, was 105,000 words long. And most people start with shorter works and then build up, but I just kind of like dove in at the deep end, basically. But yeah, I kind of wrote there was a few scenes in that where it had a kind of an imaginary ghost. So the ghost was never of a girl that actually existed. She was the ghost of someone's from someone's imagination. And it was really quite a haunting thing. And her laughter could be sort of heard echoing throughout the complex. Well, for about 2 weeks after I'd written that, I kept sort of waking up at about 2 o'clock in the morning thinking I'd heard this laughter echoing around the house. And I kept putting the light on and going back to sleep, because I'd actually scared myself, I think, with what I'd written. So yeah, I mean, in terms of an immersive experience, that was kind of like something I sort of, my mind sort of brought out of the work that I did into my reality. But that really hasn't happened since, even though I've written a lot of, you know, sort of scary, haunting things and all the rest of it. That hasn't happened again. But maybe that's because I was new to the whole thing. That could explain that. Or maybe I'm just a big softie, really. That's probably it.
Thanks for sharing that. We do have a comment from Catherine McCarthy. Good to
hi,
see
Catherine.
you, Keith. I love your stories.
She's a wonderful author, is Catherine. Yes, she's one of the community people I mentioned. Yeah, she's fabulous. I first came across Catherine, oh God, I think it was 2020 when the pandemic hit. Yeah, I decided I'd put a charity anthology together. And Catherine was one of the ladies who submitted a short story for that. And I was so blown away by her work. It was the opening story of the anthology, because I was just like, she's a star in the making, is Catherine. She's on the rise. And you know, she really is. She's doing really well. She's I would say probably, oh God, in the last 3 years, she's probably had about maybe 4, maybe 5 releases or something. She's very prolific, and with lots of different publishers. I think all of them are in the States, but Catherine's from Wales, and she's got a beautiful accent, so you should get her on your show.
Wow, Catherine, thank you so much for your comments and your support of Keith. And of course, we would love to support you and your work as well. Keith, a question I have, I heard 105,000 words, and I thought, oh my goodness, for people who are not writers and they have no idea how many words typically go on a page, how many pages would you say that was?
Oh, oh my God. Well, I mean, as a finished article in a book, just give me 1 second. I don't know. That was probably about 300 or so pages, maybe 350, something like that, depending on the size and format.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, but I mean, obviously, when I was writing it A4 as opposed to sort of more A5 size. So, you know, it would have been sort of half that. But I mean, I think the thing about a novel is that most people who write a novel will probably tell you there's a point that you get to it, which is the marathon middle, where you kind of feel, oh, I can't see the light at the end of the tunnel at this point. And you kind of feel like you're getting bogged down. Now, the thing about myself is I've never really been a plotter. So I kind of, how it generally starts for me is I will get a title will sort of appear in my head. It'll just ping into my head and I'll go, all right, I want to explore everything about that title. So it's kind of like, this isn't a pun, by the way, but it's kind of like an open book for me. I just want to explore the possibility of it and see where it takes me. And I kind of like that because sometimes if I do sort of plan a few things in my head, by the time I get to a certain section, I might have a moment of inspiration which completely takes the story in an entirely different direction that I never actually thought of. So I think if I always plotted things out, there's kind of like a danger that I would actually just stick to that all of the time and not explore the possibility of something else coming along and sort of turning it on its head and hopefully making it a better story. So yeah, I mean, the first one I did was 105,000 words. It took me 16 months to write. So in terms of giving anybody who doesn't write an idea of what it takes, I mean, I would say probably 2 months of that 16 was to edit and revise it at the end. So 14 months of actually writing it. At that point in time, I had a full-time job, so I did work in the evenings and weekends. And then after that, after I put that one out, I, like the silly boy that I am, I decided I was going to write a 104,000 word novel straight away after that one. So I spent another 18 months doing that one. So I mean, it's kind of strange because I've gone away from the big stuff now. I tend to sort of focus more on novellas, to be honest. So something that's kind of like 40,000 words, which, you know, can take 4 or 5 months, sometimes 6 months or something to do. I mean, I'm currently writing, I've gone back to writing a novel. I'm diving in there again. But that's because other things, novellas that I've written are now contracted and they're going to appear next year. I've got 2 that are coming out next year. So I've decided to write a novel, but this time I'm just going to do 70,000 words. I'm going to keep it sane. You know, just so I can have some kind of life in the process as well, and I'm not just like completely chained to my desk. So yeah, I understand that a lot of people who don't write just don't really get the concept because I mean, say for instance, if you talk to a student and they say, oh, I've got to do a 20,000 word dissertation or something for, you know, and you think, yeah, okay, that's a challenge, but it's kind of like how challenging is it really to someone that writes 200,000 words or whatever? It's like, yeah,
that's just a warm up, right?
Exactly. Well, actually, strangely, for my second novel, I did write 20,000 words in one day. I've never done that again. It's certainly not something I would sort of want to do, but it was only because I'd sort of planned out how the next sort of 3 or 4 sections were going to go in my head. And then I just sat down one day and I think I typed from about 9 o'clock in the morning till about 11:30 at night and just drank coffee continuously. And then, you know, basically didn't see daylight. And then just rattle out those 20,000 words. So yeah, it can be done in a day, but I wouldn't recommend it.
Congratulations. And you know, you said you were a pantser, not a plotter.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
That's me. And
yeah.
It is really fun when you have that moment of inspiration and then you go, well, I'm not going to go back and change anything. I'm just going to keep with that and see where it takes me. And then in edits, you can kind of go. I like to think of it as like clay. You have a blob of clay. Yeah. And then you start molding it. And then you're like, wait, that's not the way I want to go. Smush. And you start it over again.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it just kind of makes the whole process a little bit more exciting. That you can just kind of suddenly come to a fork in the road, you know, and you just think, it's going to go that way instead. And I think quite a lot of the things that I've written, that's actually happened. It's kind of, I've just had a new idea. And it quite often, it doesn't necessarily need to be the main sort of narrative. It can be something like, it could be a backstory, or it could be just a new sort of, revelation about a character or something a character decides to do, which takes the story in a different direction. So I think it's really handy. I mean, I suppose the best of both worlds would be a plotter to an extent, and then it's sort of kind of leave that a little bit open, you know. I think that's because I think if you just sort of pants the whole thing, you might actually just it might just come off the rails at some point, you know what I mean? So and you're kind of left wondering where you're going to go with it. So I mean, I've spoke to a lot of other authors who say that, you know, they put like sort of sticky notes around the place and things like that, or put notes on their iPhone or whatever. I mean, I always think there's a range of ideas that work for everyone.
Absolutely.
You know,
Absolutely.
Yeah,
so.
absolutely.
I'm sorry, Dr. Jacalyn, go ahead.
No. I was just going to say, we're going to show your website, and then I'd love to have you read for one of your books for us, if you would.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, fantastic. All right, let me share my screen, and then you can tell our audience what it is we're looking at. Here we are.
Okay, so these mainly the titles that I've put out to date, which were self-published, because that's the way I started. I came from a background of being an editor before I was ever a writer. That sort of dates back to my mid-20s. I started a magazine, which was a music magazine. And I started it as a regional thing here in England, and then I managed to get some national TV exposure for it. So I then got approached by the national news trade, so they took it on a contract, and it went national. So I was constantly on the train down to London, backwards and forwards, interviewing bands and everything that were going to Europe to tour. And then once that had folded, I went into newspapers, and I worked my way up to become like a senior editor there. And then after that, I became a publishing editor for an international company. And that was all web-based. So I decided, once I was going to become a fiction writer at the age of 45, that I would just do everything myself, because I'd also been a graphic designer. So I designed all the covers, I formatted the interiors, I did all the editing and revision, and I just used Amazon because it was such an easy way to put those things out. So Diabolica Britannica is the anthology that I mentioned that Catherine got involved in. And some of these others are just the Jesus Man is the first novel that I ever wrote. Nexilexicon is the second one that I wrote. If you could scroll further down, if you can.
Yes, let me just get over here. Okay.
Yeah, and then the other two, the Americana and HEX-PERIMENTS, they're all charity anthologies. And then some of the other ones are just kind of novelettes or short stories. Because then that's when I'd kind of reached the point when I was done with self-publishing. So, and I started sending my work out. And it's funny because Catherine is actually, she was fundamental in that, to be honest. Because I was asking around which publishers were interested in, you know, taking submissions. Because sometimes they have open calls, which you don't have to have an agent for. I was basically up against a deadline. I think I had 2 weeks to finish this novella, and it was like 27,000 words. Ultimately, that's what it ended up being. And Catherine, I'd done a favor for her in terms of formatting our work for her, and she said, "Oh, I'll edit it for you before you send it off to the publisher." So I was just basically writing 9,000 words, sending her a section, and then start and continuing on doing the next 9,000, and then the next 9,000. And she edited it for me and sent it back, and I managed to hit the deadline. Unfortunately, that publisher wasn't interested. It was a publisher in Chicago. They weren't interested, but it garnered interest from 2 publishers, and Brigid's Gate was one of them. So I decided to go with them. So I think further down on the website, it's got the novella, which was a dark fantasy novella. Yeah, this one. This is the one I'm going to read from, In the Grimdark Strands of the Spinneret. It's basically, if you took a child's fairy tale, an old fable from the past, and if you kind of made it for adults. So the content is, you know, there's lots of battles in there, but there's witchcraft, there's all kinds of stuff. And there's lots of betrayals, people wanting power, people wanting revenge to get the power back, and things like that. So that's what that one's about. So that one came out in November last year via Brigid's Gate. And then I've got 2 more novellas coming out next year. There hasn't been any kind of official announcement, so I can't say who the publisher is. but you might want to hazard a guess. Yeah. So that's about where we're at. And I'm also I'm coming out in an anthology as well by what they called Timber Ghost Press in America, which is I don't know if you've heard of horror westerns. Does that make sense? Well, they take tales of the Old West and then they kind of mash them with horror, elements of horror. So there's an anthology coming out called Along Harrowed Trails, which is coming out in July this year via Timber Ghost Press. So I've actually got a story in there as well. So
wow. I'm really looking forward to hearing you read. I do have one question, then we also have a comment. My question is, for people who have a full-time job and they're writing on the side or the weekends, when did you realize, okay, this is something that I can do as a full-time career? Because they're always debating that. Should I just do a side gig? How does it become a side gig to a full-time career?
Well, I mean, I suppose it kind of happens differently for different folks. I mean, when I decided that I was going to sort of make a step away from working full-time and writing, I was with my then partner, and she said, well, you know, let's look at our finances. Will that be okay if you just go down to part-time? So I went down to part-time work. She brought in the lion's share of the money, and I just it gave me more time to write. So I'm currently in a situation where, I mean, we're no longer together. I'm on my own now, but I'm still just working part-time. So between working part-time and what I make through book sales is pretty much enough for me to be okay. But the main thing for me is the time. The time is the most precious thing, because, you know, if I work sort of 3 days a week and I've got 4 days a week for writing, and then obviously getting involved with the publisher, and then getting Mickey Mickelson involved, and having time to do publicity things, then, you know, it becomes a bit more of a juggle. So I would say I am kind of, after 8 years of doing all of this, I'm kind of like at a sort of tipping point. I'm sort of in the middle where if the book sales were to take off more, then I could just leave my part-time job and just make a living from writing. So I'm kind of on the cusp of that. That's kind of like where I am at this point in time. My advice would be to anyone is just make sure that you've got that kind of financial safety net beneath you. Because the last thing you want while you're trying to invest in your writing career is to have financial worries and have the stress of that, which is just going to, you know, it's just going to take your mind away from what you really want to do, which is be creative. Yeah.
Exactly. Wow. Thanks for sharing that. I think that's insightful and helpful to a lot of people. So I appreciate it. All right. We've got a comment again from Catherine. So happy that you're still with us. Adult fairy tales are the best, and Keith does a great job.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Keith, you have the screen and the stage. Go ahead and take it away.
Right. I'm going to have to take my glasses off to read, strangely enough. And I'm going to have a wee drink. Okay, so this is from that said fairy tale, and just for context, what's happened is, imagine a medieval world where a daughter has been sort of punished because she fell pregnant to the Baron, and in that society it was like out of wedlock and all the rest of it. So she's been punished. She's been stoned, unfortunately, by the villagers. So her mother is carrying her body out into the forest to meet with a necromancer, an old crone, who she thinks will be able to bring her daughter back to life. Okay, so what's happened is she's brought her daughter and she lays her down, yeah, in front of the necromancer. So here we go. She was to follow and bring her cold offspring to the site where no saplings could grow. There was a whispered calm here, and a lone fractured bough of an age-old tree, which had been dragged to the spot for some hidden purpose. Draped upon its form, the dead girl and the focal point were now bonded, and what was wished for could be asked of the necromancer. Asked it was, and rejected, for the tainting of the body was too great. Though one glimmer of solace was given. She was to leave. She was to return to her village, to her now empty life, and pass the years waiting for a special child to arrive, seeking to board with her. A knock would come in the most empty hour of the night, and this gifted youngling was to be housed in the outbuildings with the cattle. Cradling her sorrow, she departed that soulless place in the knowledge that the bargain she'd made would one day come at a price. Enchanted moonlight set down a path for her to follow, and a nocturnal birthing began. Cut from the corpse, the lifeless infant was administered surgical demonology. The parts unneeded were removed and fed to wild things which came at the crone's behest. These were the offerings given in exchange for other pieces, which were grafted to the reimagined corporal shard. An effigy of root, twine, and dark ochre was fashioned with great care, and then set to flame with the smoke blown by mouth over the motionless construct. As the hexen dolly reduced, the incantation was evoked between creeping fumes which slipped in eldritch ways into the nose and throat. And so it came to pass, in the most empty hour of the night, that new life was born from the entrails of death, and its cries were another weeping of the forest.
Wow. Wow. What was that phrase? Surgical demonology?
Surgical demonology.
What is that?
I made it up.
I love it. I was like, that is amazing. Is that like surgery through demons, or
no? It's kind of in my mind. What it was the witch, the crone, is having to do actual sort of surgery because she's reimagining what this human child will be. It's going to be part human and part something else. But she's invoking incantations and spells while she's doing it. So the demonology part of that is that she's acquiring the means and the rights to do this by speaking to dark forces and incorporating dark forces in what she does. So that's what that sort of covers. Yeah.
I love it. I love learning something new.
Well, I'm glad I can educate people. That's fantastic.
DIANN, I think you're on mute.
Sorry, I didn't want to mess up while I was reading. What a great imagination. Oh my gosh, your adjectives. I was just like, if I had a hair on my arms, it'd be standing up.
I could feel the hair on the back of my head doing that, actually. While I was doing that.
Yeah, there you go.
I mean, for that one, what I actually had to do was, it was quite difficult because I had to kind of like try and stay in the mindset of an old fable and keep that constantly going for the whole novella. And sometimes it's hard to keep that. So it's written in a very stylistic way, and you kind of have to like sort of keep your mind on that track, otherwise you could easily slip out of it and write in a more modern way. Mm-hmm. So that was the challenge with that one. It's because people have reviewed it so far and they've said they feel like they're reading something new, but they feel like it's also centuries old, which was kind of what I was aiming at. I was aiming it to feel like an old tome, a big dusty old book that you would just pick up from somewhere, and it was written in medieval times or something. So that's kind of like the atmosphere and the mood that I wanted to create with it. So, and I think judging by the reviews so far, it's certainly done that. So I'm very happy.
Congratulations.
Yeah, congratulations.
Thank you, Lenny.
When you were writing it, or as you think about it now, do you write to have it on multiple platforms? So, for example, a TV series or a film or some kind of animation?
To be honest, I mean, what I'm looking to do, I'm looking to acquire an agent. I mean, obviously I've got a publisher, I've got a publicist now. I would like an agent. So kind of like have the holy trinity of the publishing world is to have all three, isn't it? Mm-hmm. So that really would be the next sort of step. Because really what I'd like to see is I'd like to get to the point where things are adapted for screen. some of the works, and obviously I'm going to need an agent in order to pursue that kind of thing. I mean, I think when I write certainly in my head. I write in a very cinematic way, so it's, you know, I can just sort of see all of these things taking place in great detail. So you know, to actually have that realized and to have that on the big screen would be fantastic. But obviously there's lots of steps between sort of wanting that and that actually happening. So you know, I mean, I think you know, everything's changing anyway now, isn't it? I mean, sort of streaming dominates a great deal of what goes on now. So I mean, you know, if I got something that was a Netflix adaptation, or, you know, HBO or something like that, that would just be phenomenal. So but that's certainly kind of in my sights moving forward. That's really the kind of thing that I would like to see happen, and I'm going to actively pursue via an agent, you know. I mean, with this novel that I'm currently writing this year, I do want to try and engage an agent with that, rather than kind of send it to a publisher direct, which I've done up to this point. I think I want to get on board with an agent via this one and see if something can be done that way. So, you know, I better look, watch this space. You might actually see something I've written on TV at some point. So that would be fantastic.
I see it. I think I know it's happening. I could just feel it and see it.
I like the vibes you're sending my way.
You put it out there, so now we have to make sure.
Yeah. It's got to happen. Yeah. The cosmos has got to answer, hasn't it? That's it.
Yeah.
I have just a question. We're always trying to provide education for people here as well. So there's so many people who are just self-published. What are the advantages to having a publicist and having a publisher and having an agent? Is it specifically about getting to more people? Is it about more money? Is it about more opportunities? Is it about less work for yourself? Is it all the above?
I think it's a combination of all those factors, really. Certainly when you've got a publisher, even just a publisher without the publicist, I think, you know, it kind of, you know, I mean, there was a big explosion with self-publishing, but I think, you know, that was kind of taking place about 10 years ago when Amazon sort of really exploded in 2013, and you could self-publish and you could sell a lot then. I think if you're going to go that route now, I think it's a lot harder. I really do, because it kind of became a saturated market, and because it became saturated, there was a lot of quality that was put out, but then there was I think there was a lot more that wasn't quality, and I think that, you know, the public sort of recognized that and went, oh, okay, well, we'll take a step back from this a little bit, because we've been stung with both things that haven't been edited properly, or it looks badly formatted, or whatever. I think definitely with getting a publisher and a publicist, because I felt like on my own I was struggling to do everything. You've got to wear 8 different hats, and you just can't divide yourself. Like, you can't give enough energy to those things. And certainly, I mean, obviously with the publisher, Brigid's Gate have expanded their roster, and when you expand your roster to a certain amount of titles, then you can get in bricks and mortar stores. So then they're now in Barnes and Noble. They're now in Walmart. They're now in libraries. So, and then also via Ingram, they are pursuing the UK market and the European market in terms of actual physical stores. We've got a chain over here called Waterstones, which is our big sort of Barnes and Noble, if you like. And so they're making inroads with Waterstones. So they're going to have a presence in the UK. And I've never really had that myself. I've only been able to do that independently by going to independent stores and giving them copies of my books, physical copies, and coming to an agreement with them. So that's going to be like a national thing. So yeah, it's so much bigger. And then the likes of what Mickey can do, you know, he can open the door. And Mickey's always, you know, he's been dead honest with me from the start, and with any of the other authors, is just basically it's like a game of building blocks. So you kind of like start small and you get bigger and bigger and bigger over time. He's not suddenly going to pick someone up and drop them into some really scary scenario, which is just as well. So it's just kind of like building. Everything's about building. So the more expansion I think you get for your product, and just the more coverage, the more eyes on things, that's really how it works. It's just as simple as that. And I think certainly nowadays as well, if you can get lucky, if you can get like a TikTok video go viral or something like that. I mean, we've all heard of the success stories off the backs of that. But I mean, those kind of things, I think they're sort of few and far between. I don't think they happen, to the vast majority of writers. They only happen every now and again to a few. But yeah, I mean, I just think everything's about exposure. The more exposure you get, the better your chances. It's as simple as that.
Thank you so much for sharing that with our audience. And we encourage people to keep writing and then get it published. Don't keep hiding it on a shelf or under the bed or making excuses, right?
Yeah, put it out there. Sing about it. Yeah,
that's right. Because just like Keith and Diane and Catherine, they started somewhere and now look where they are today. So we want that for our audience as well. Keith, we are at the end of our show, and thank you for joining us for our first episode.
Well, thank you. I feel blessed and honored. I really do. Thank you very much. And it's been lovely to speak to you both. I hope we get to chat again very soon.
Absolutely. And we would love for you to share with our audience, how can people reach out to you and get your books, and how can people pick your brain and maybe co-write something? I don't know. I'm just putting it out there.
Yeah, I've already just co-written something with someone, so that avenue's closed for a wee while. The best thing to do is just look on social media, Twitter, Instagram. That's where I'm at. My website is kind of under construction, but if you Googled me, if you Googled my name, Keith Anthony Baird, you'll find everything kind of associated with me out there, and it's all just a click away. So that's the best thing to do.
I love that expression. It's just a click away. Very nice.
Same thing.
Beautiful. Diane, how can people reach out to you? And do you have any announcements that you're keeping under lock and key?
You can reach me at DIANNFLOYDBOEHM, DIANNFLOYD BOEHM. My website has all social media on there. So whatever your favorite is, Twitter, Instagram, etc., you can just click and you'll be there. And my big announcement, as you know, Dr. Jacalyn, is my new children's book is going to come out in July. So be watching for the ebook release. And it's Boomer, the Curious Bunny.
Yay! I love that. I love the name Boomer. We have a comment from Catherine. Yay. I'd love to say you're a wonderful host, so warm, and I'd love to book with you around September, October time when my release with Brigid's Gate is due. Well done. Absolutely. We'd love to have you. And for people who are interested in booking in, and Keith, we want to have you back, just go to our website. It's usaglobaltv.com, and you'll see book your session. And you can just go there and book on any of our 37 weekly shows. Yay. All right. We are signing off for right now. Our next show is Talking Heads, starring the Harley Street stress expert, Caroline Heward, who will help you bust your stress. And she's going to be talking about how we make decisions and what we're eating and how that reflects how we're feeling. And I can certainly relate to that one. So thank you again, Keith. Thank you, Diane. Thank you, Catherine, and everyone else out there. Bye for now.
Take care.
Bye-bye.